Welcome everyone to episode number 49 of the Broken by Concept podcast. This is a long one coming. We have Cupcake here joining us, who was our support in 2018 Dials. Obviously, Curtis and I have talked a lot about our Dials adventures. Andy helped us. We call him Andy. I'll be calling you Andy here, Cupcake, if that's all right. Actually, we'll just stick to you with Cupcake because Cupcake's Cupcake. Cupcake here helped us go from back to back finalists. We represented 2 years is when Dial was the most dominant team in OCE that Curtis and I built. The roster started in 2017. Our support was Destiny, and then Cupcake became our support in 2018. So why this is a real special podcast is Cupcake is a much more unique player in terms of the journey he became a pro player. And there's some things we're going to touch on here, but the biggest one is that Andy actually came from a competitive sporting background. Tennis, I believe you got a scholarship. You went to America and lived in America for, what was the
couple
league
of years
that you're in?
It was a scholarship to New Mexico, which is like in the southwest of the States, but it's basically just Division I college tennis.
So yeah, what I want to start with you, Andy, is sort of just the way that you became a pro player. And we're probably going to go in different sort of directions here because obviously there's Curtis and I's version of how we saw you in the scene, before you joined us. And then the big thing as well is what Cupcake / Andy was. He supported Lost, who's currently the AD carry for TSM, for a whole year. So also worked with, before he went to North America the next year, was it 2019?
Yeah, he left in 2019 and he was in the... Fox. Yeah, he was in the academy team for the most part, and then got a couple games on the main roster, then back to the academy, and then he found TSM. But he was straight to NA after that year, yeah.
So let's start with your tennis, Andy, and the biggest thing I want to talk about here is talking about how that sort of your mindset, sort of like what was your mindset to getting good at League of Legends? Like, was League of Legends something you played and you said I want to be a pro player, or was it like you're playing on the side and you were just doing your tennis thing and you're like, oh, I could actually get good at this game and then I could be a pro player?
Right. I think I was very, very late to actually playing League. So when I was growing up, I was kind of a gamer, but I wasn't really allowed to game as much as I wanted, or pretty much only like a few hours on the weekend because my parents were really strict. So when I was growing up, it was just tennis and maybe like a little bit of study. And then after I came back from the States, I didn't have tennis back here in New Zealand. And it was quite a big shift in like my day-to-day routine, because in the States, I was a full-time tennis player and studying a degree. So it was like 4 hours of practice and a lot of uni. And then we would be traveling every weekend to like a different state to compete. So when I came back, there was kind of like a competitive void that I felt I needed to fill, and I didn't really know how. And I was also kind of in like a bad spot in my life. I wasn't doing too well. I was a bit depressed, and I just started gaming like all day, every day. And it wasn't born from trying to pursue it in a competitive sense. I didn't even know it like really existed. I was just playing a lot of League.
And we like to always talk about people sometimes playing Leagues an escape. Like, would you say that was like sort of an escape for you? Okay. So 100%. It wasn't big to become a pro player. It was just like use it as an escape, distract me from real world things. And then you got good enough to be a pro player. Is that sort of like the way?
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
So you didn't know an esports scene existed when you were playing?
No, I had no idea. I was completely out of that whole realm. I didn't know anyone. I watched like Worlds and stuff. I didn't know if OS had anything going on at all.
What year was this? What year was this?
2016. Midway through 2016 is when I started playing, pretty much, I would say.
So what was your rank journey look like? Was it instant challenger, diamond? What did it look like?
Okay. I've like been playing since season 1, but just like an hour a week, just on a laptop with like trackpad kind of stuff, like nothing special. But I started to play a lot, middle of 2016. So the first time I grinded was actually in the States, when I had like a few weeks and I wasn't going to come back home for holiday and I had nothing to do. So I'm like, all right, fuck it, let's play some League. And I had no expectations about how good I was or anything. and I expected to just be like plat. But then I went like D5, D3, D1. I was one tricking Jack's top, and I was like, oh shit, this is really weird. This doesn't make any sense. Like,
Which this was an NA.
yeah, yeah. So I'm like, okay, NA's pretty good. I haven't really played this game before, and I'm climbing a lot, so that's pretty encouraging. I thought that was pretty cool. And then I came back, um, yeah, picked it up in OS as well.
Was that competitive? Like, what was the competitive aspect? Like, did you view League as like the same way you viewed the competition in your tennis? Because I mean, if you're competing in a scholarship, that's serious competition, right? Like, you would have to like did you have that mindset? Were you just playing to play? Like, there must have been something
Yeah.
there, Andy. What was that?
I mean, the tennis was extremely stressful. There was a lot of pressure. I had like a really a big scholarship, 100% scholarship. So my performance really meant a lot in every way. And then with League, yeah, as I said, I didn't really know anything about the competitive scene at all. I was a gamer. I played some games. It was fun. And I've always been a very competitive person. So I was drawn to playing ranked instead of normals. But there wasn't an initial endeavor to make a career out of it, if that makes sense.
So it wasn't until you came back to OCR that then how did you get onto XL5? How did that all happen?
Yeah. So I was getting like master or like low challenger, and I was still playing full. I didn't really have a role, and I can't remember exactly what pushed me to choose a role. I think it was some teams or players contacting me, and I'm like, oh shit, you actually need to like play one role to get on a team. So I was like, okay, I guess I should choose one, and then I think I.
That's ridiculous, Andy. Like everything that you just said right there to me just makes no sense.
It's everything where you say the opposite of on this podcast, right?
Okay, because what's fascinating here, right, is that your journey. Okay, I need to preface this before we go any further here because I think Nathan missed a few things here because I think I want to preface this by saying that I truly believe in Oceania's history. There's a few like diamonds in the rough. Right, we have. I would say we've kind of, to be honest with you, individually, I think OS has actually generated a lot of individually great players, comparatively to our server base.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so when I think back in the history of OS, this is even before you were really in the scene. If I think back, players that I thought could have easily gone internationally and competed at the highest level, maybe Schernfire in his prime, Swiffer in his prime, Radier in his prime, Fudge in his prime, obviously Lost and FBI in their prime, and then you. So there's certain players that really spring out to me. Now, amongst those players, so there's like 9 of them or 10 of them, let's say there's those 10 players that I believe that were just leaps and bounds above their competitors.
Destiny, Raze, King. Missed a
King,
lot there, guys.
yes. No, I don't believe Raze. Raze in very brief moments, but Destiny. I never kind of view Destiny as like that WoW player for me, anyway. That is the way I interpret him. Now, when it came to Cupcake, out of all these players, if I would like rank them, in my mind, it's like at the absolute prime is you and Shern. Comparatively to everyone. And for me, I've always looked up to you as a player, and I just want to give a bit of context to the people listening to this podcast, is that Cupcake wasn't just any player to me. Cupcake was like the elite of the elite at your prime. And I believe your prime was like mid 2018. There was like times where I would just be like watching you, right? In the room, and I'd just be like, wow. Like, this guy is the package. Like, he communicates, he acts with intention, he is intense, he takes over, he makes game-winning plays consistently. Game-winning calls and game-winning plays consistently, and King, who now, obviously plays for C9 Academy, King never would have been the 80 carry he was if he did not have you in 2018. Because King, yes, he had the hands, but he didn't have that intensity, didn't have that competitive drive. And I think in ways that he probably, I don't know if he said this to you, but I believe from watching it on the outside, King really leveled up his approach to the game because of that influence you had on him, that very hyper competitive drive.
We called it the boar mentality, right? The boar mentality.
Yeah, no, he has brought that up to me.
Right. So we'll probably touch on that
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah, I want to touch on that later.
We'll definitely touch on that later. But I just want to preface this because to get the player that you were at that period of time, it doesn't make sense to me that even in 2016 you barely decided a role and you just kind of stumbled into the scene. Like that just doesn't. It's just crazy to me. It's just like how there has to, your view of the game. That's what I really want to get into. This is like how does Nathan's alluding to it now? How did you go from just tennis,
Right.
playing Phil, picking a random role, and then becoming the best? Like so, yeah. I think moving on from first of all, how did you pick a role? What did that mean to you? And kind of walk us through that process.
So honestly, picking support was really arbitrary. I was a full player, and you just get support most of the time. So I'm like, all right, why not? And as my career progressed, it kind of dawned on me that maybe support wasn't the best suited role for my personality. I feel like I'm a personality that is quite strong and knows what it wants, and support is typically more a facilitative role. And if my personality was on like a carry role, I would know how to maximize resources and take over a game. But then as my career progressed, I'm like, okay, I think I have a unique personality for the support role, and I can really like make my niche in the scene this way, having like a really strong communicating and like driven player in that role is really valuable. So yeah, choosing the role was really very arbitrary, and thinking back on it, I should have put more thought into it, but I wasn't approaching it initially with the with my like future career and stuff in mind, as I was saying.
If there were champions that
yeah.
like Bard and Alistair that never existed, and let's say you would have to play like Nami and like Gianna and stuff, if that's what you would only have to play in support, would you think you still would have picked the role?
Yeah, I think you can express skill and personality on every single type of champion, whether it's Tam or Bard or Thresh or anything. I one tricked no, I like two tricked Janna and Nami when I first got to Challenger, like
I did not even know that.
end of 2016. Yeah.
Dude, I whenever I think of Andy, like again, we got to give a bit of color to Andy as a player. Is that I truly believe to the bottom. I would bet any amount of money that your Tom would have to be one of the best in the world at that time.
Oh shit.
In 2018, like that 2017, 2018, your Pike, your Bard, your Tom were just like it was unbelievable.
I had a lot of confidence on Tom.
You had no confidence on Tom.
No. I had a lot of confidence
Yeah.
on Tom. I think I probably talked about like dick sizes and dicks so much more when I played Tom versus any other champ.
That's how you know Andy's confidence level.
You can big dick. I'm waving my dick around.
So talk us through that, because look, a big part of my when I coach, like in my community, picking a champion is just unbelievably. It is brought up way too much, and I don't know how familiar you are with my philosophy on the game, but I'm a big advocate of champion mastery. Like getting really, really good at one champion and then expressing yourself through a champion matters more than the champ itself. So like you said, anyone could play Tom, but not many people could have reached a level of people weren't as good as Tom. Like Destiny, for example, would try and play Tom, but it just looks like a different champion because you got to such a high level with that champ that you discovered things about it that no one else would. Same thing for Bard, same thing for Pike. Now, how did you, first of all, get the motive? This is going to be a pretty big question, but first of all, how did you pick those champs to really hone in on? And then once you did pick them, you kind of intuitively were drawn towards champ mastery, or what allowed you to... Why did you kind of hone in so much on champions rather than having like a massive champion ocean? Like, what was it that attracted you to really honing in?
Yeah, okay. I think Bard and Pike would be in a little bit of a different category to Tom. So with Bard and Pike, I feel like those are one of the very few champions in the game that you can have full control over the outcome. If you play perfectly, you can like win the game for your team. And I think the meta has developed a little bit since then, and it's harder to solo carry. But Bard and Pike, like the execution ceiling is so incredibly high, and it was so challenging to try and master them that I just fell in love with them. I wanted to like put the biggest challenges possible on myself. Um, and another, maybe this goes hand in hand with like the high ceiling, but those are champs that if you mess up, you don't like die. So imagine Leona or Nautilus or Rel, like you engage, mess up, you're in there, you die. But with Bard and Pike, you can constantly have uptime, even if you make a few small mistakes. Like you always have the escapability, the mobility, and you can just constantly pressure the map. Whereas with other champions, it's more you're facilitating your carries to do something, or you need follow up, or it's like very one dimensional. So
So it's more like independent.
It's independent and it's multi-dimensional. So I feel like I can just do so much, and the champions can do so much if you're good enough at it. So that's why I was drawn to those.
So what kept you playing it though? Because was it the what I always say to people is like you got to it's some element you got to love the champ. You got to genuinely find the champion fun, I believe, to a certain extent. But I believe like champions get more fun the deeper you get into that champion mastery like area. So what was it that really motivated you to just keep taking things to the next level? Was it that you were finding new things about the champion, or was it that you just had so much fun that it just didn't matter? Or what was it that just kept you going? Because you had to play a shit ton of time and a shit ton of Bard and Pike together.
Yeah, I can get to time later, but for Bard and Pike, it was mostly the high level of skill ceiling that just constantly kept me drawn to them. And once I reached that initial window of like learning, inting, wasting skill shots, testing limits, when I felt like those champions were part of me, as stupid as it sounds, then I can really start to like explore like builds and other things. So like typically when you see a professional game on Bard, you'll only see Guardian and Domination. Is that the red tree? Yeah. But once I got comfortable with like how each rune feels on Bard, I know when it's best to take Phase Rush or Electrocute or Predator, or like when to mix and match like the secondary runes, and that felt really fun. I felt like I was a bit of like little scientist, just running my experiments, and that kept it fresh. And yeah, every game is just those champs are just so challenging, so it's always a lot of fun.
You just said something there that I have to kind of rewind and touch on there. I don't know if you caught it as well, Nathan. Notice how the way. So what? Okay, what my intention when talking to you, one of the big things I want to find out is there are certain players or traits of pro players that that make them reach limits that other people would otherwise kind of cap out at, or maybe overlook, or areas that they would just overlook. And one of the way you said that sentence before, the way you said that sentence before, you said, I was looking at like if I missed a skill shot, like you were intuitively viewing that as a big mistake. Now, what's super interesting is that when I coach people a lot of the time, I'll have to overemphasize how important that one singular mistake is. I'm like, you just missed this skill shot. If you hit this skill shot, this lane is...
You're playing a different game of League of Legends.
You're playing a different game of League of Legends. And now, what you just said there is that you intuitively understood early on in the process that a singular missed skill shot or a singular missed ability can be the difference between winning or losing a lane, or it has a lot of impact over the game. Now, do you think in any way, shape, or form this came from tennis, or your competitive background, or your high standard to the way you approach tennis?
Right. I think it is a personality trait. I think it's like sensitivity to mistakes, or like having an emotional reaction to like imperfection. So I think it's in general just a perfectionist trait that whatever competitive endeavor I'm in, I will avoid mistakes like the plague, and I will try to be the best that I possibly can. So in that way, I don't see myself as a tennis player. I don't see myself as a League of Legends player. I see myself as like a competitor that has the skill set to rise to the top of any hierarchy, like competitive hierarchy that I put myself in. And maybe that's like a bit arrogant or something, but that confidence definitely helps. And
Where
whenever
does
I
that
do
come from, though,
competition,
Andy? Did that come from tennis? Where did that come from? You're
um,
just born
it,
that way?
so I mean, I was very competitive and successful in tennis, but I thought I was a tennis player. I thought I was, I started at an early age. Maybe I had some talent for tennis as well, so I was lucky. But then once um, the the next chapter in my life with League of Legends came around, I was like, oh shit, I can't just be a tennis player. There has to be an explanation for like how these different chapters of my life are interacting. So yeah, I always reflect on my life and myself, and I try to be as critical as I can. And it just made the most sense to me that the there is a common skill set that allows success in both of these endeavors. Um, and yeah, I would say being a competitor and knowing how to improve at any skill makes sense to me, at least.
It's like comes
Right.
natural to you. Again, it's the way you did say that, and Curtis is right. It's like you think it's obvious, Andy. I did it as well. It's like when you make it like a mistake, like a mechanical mistake, or you misplay that skirmish. Like in my head, against like it's a different game. I'm playing League of Legends. Like especially in League of Legends, how snowbally it is. I don't know if tennis is exactly that snowbally because you can like reset, point right.
Well, the score carries over. So
Okay,
if
yeah,
you
that's
fall
right.
behind,
That's right. So it is
yeah,
snowballing, I guess, in a way, because it's like if you
Oh,
get that
in a
set,
way,
then it's like you're close.
but I would say there's a mental. Surely there's a mental thing in
there,
tennis. But
there's a lot of mental and like momentum in tennis because each point is completely different and isolated from the previous point, which is different to like game states in League of Legends, right? So League was definitely there. There are so many differences between League and tennis, but so many similarities at the same time. Done a lot of reflecting, but yeah, yeah.
Because
because
again,
yeah,
I love the way that again he said it. It's like he's so obvious. It's like oh, like I missed
it's like
a single
intuitive.
shot. It's intuitive, but again,
Yeah.
Curtis, I agree with you. Like I coach, like I've done thousands of reviews, right? Coached hundreds of people, and again, they would never talk about it. Like I just heard Andy talk about it there, which is interesting. It's so obvious, but like I
It's so
try to
obvious,
emphasize it, and
yeah.
I always think I do a terrible job at doing that, because I'm like oh, it's
Yeah.
game losing. Like come on, it's like there's no point reviewing the rest of the game, and I've got like a I mean, it's overlapped into your community as well, because the end of review mindset, right?
End
It's
of
like
review,
just
yeah.
end of review, just stop the game, okay? And like it can be toxic in a way, and I've dealt with many students that it is toxic, where it's like you can go, I think you can go to it too far, where it's like, let's say the perfectionist mindset. This is what I struggled with all last year when I was stuck in Diamond, is that if I didn't play perfectly, I would like give up because I was like, well, I don't deserve to win this game anyway. But it seemed like you didn't
Yeah,
have that, Andy. But did you
it's
understand what I'm saying? How you can go too far, but I think you never went too far.
it is very easy to go too far, and I think too far is when you cross the line between constructive and destructive criticism. If you constructively criticize all of your mistakes, I believe there's no upper limit. You can be like, I should have done this better. This is what I could have
Yeah.
done specifically. But if you start saying like, I fucking suck. This game sucks. What am I doing? I should just quit. Like that's obviously destructive, right? And then you should probably assess how you're approaching everything.
But you know what's
But
so
yeah,
interesting? Sorry to interrupt, but I just Andy, like, it's so funny because I'm getting overwhelmed with a lot of memories because, like, I don't know that whole look. I don't know if you feel the same, but you kind of just forget what you went through, kind of like when you go through, even when you think back to 2017, 2018, like those splits. Like a lot happens in a very short period of time.
It's like
And
10
so
years.
yeah, like it feels like a split feels like for ages, but like when you look back, it's just like a bunch of events that are jam packed into a very short period of time. And I remember vividly the way you conducted reviews. And again, this kind of ties back to something that you felt was normal, but it's just not. It was like you get so worked up about why are we just not getting pressure here? Like why that one wave? It's like one wave, and it's like why are they pressuring us here? Like just even if you feel pressured, every single thing in the game you question it. It's like if they're pressuring me, is like how can I either prevent that or how can I be the one pressuring them? That's like when I view you. And why this is why again I thought you were so far ahead of every pro player I had ever seen, and at your peak, I just think was just unbelievably just so far ahead. It was just this drive and obsession. It was an obsession about not giving pressure or having pressure and threat.
Right.
No, screw them. They're not allowed to do this. That's illegal. You know, that mentality. And I think this carried on to, yeah, like you said, it is an element of perfectionism, but I think this, in combination with your ability to stay focused throughout a game, is what made you so dangerous. Now, while we're on this topic, I think what we should do is I want you to kind of outline or have a crack at, I guess, taking apart your mentality within a game, because what was so impressive when I was in comps, something disastrous would happen, but I would see you have this mode where you're just in it, nothing can get in your way. How do you, when something unfortunate happens in a game, how do you let it go? What is your process of letting something go, moving on, getting into the next thing? What do you do?
Right.
For you?
Yeah. I think maybe it's a misconception that some people just don't have emotional reactions to certain situations. I think everyone does, and we're all human. But I just really want to win, and I can recognize that emotions get in the way of that. So if I die and then I have a strong emotional reaction to it, I'm like, fuck, that was so bad, man. What are you doing? Then I'm like, no, you got to shut up, and you got to be communicating about what's next, and you got to make sure it doesn't happen next time and stuff like that. So it's how I do control emotions. I would say I recognize them as soon as they come up, and I firmly believe that emotions it's pretty thin ice when you combine emotions with competition or trying to do anything at the highest level. Sometimes it can help, a lot of times it doesn't. And I think just having that cool, calm, collected, almost cold drive goes a long way. And that's how I try to conduct myself. Does that make sense?
Was it a win at all cost mentality? Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, I would say so. It doesn't even feel like it's a conscious decision between two things. It's there's no other option. I have to do what's necessary to win, and I figure out.
And you knew that if you're emotional about a play, that equals not winning as much. So you have to.
Yeah, it'll lead to bad game states, missed opportunities, lack of pressure. So if I just recognize it and just stick focused and disciplined as much as possible, then that'll be the highest chance to win.
You said before, Andy, where you like to experiment with things, even builds and stuff like that. Obviously, there's a really big. Everyone loves talking about builds and optimization and stuff. When you were climbing League of Legends, did you copy other Jax players, or did you just be oh, this build works for me? What was your mindset in terms of runes and items and stuff?
I didn't know any pro players. I didn't know any league websites. I just kind of built what felt good, I think. I can't really remember. It was really long ago. I can't even remember what the items or what websites were up or anything, but I wasn't active in the league scene. It was just I had a few weeks break from tennis in uni, and I just played league, So yeah.
So what's super interesting, Nathan, I don't know if you picked up on this as well, is that I would say, yes, there's an obvious element of, you had this inherent sense of self-confidence that you could improve at something because you were in that, based off your experiences growing up, you were in a competitive environment, you knew how to get better at something, whether it was actively or just intuitively. But also there's a sense of you weren't really comparing yourself to anyone. You've always been this outlier. It's I am Cupcake. This is the way I play the game. And you completely detached yourself from, oh, that's how that person plays Bard, or that's how that's what champion that guy plays, or... so walk us through, why was that never in the realm? Did it ever cross your mind? Did you ever, you never compared your rank to someone else? Or how did you kind of view yourself in relation to your counterparts as you were getting better and things like that? even in the pro when you're at the pro level as well? What prevented you from going down that rabbit hole?
I just something intuitive inside me made me recognize that that's just not the best way to produce skill or results. I think snippets of this conversation floats around with like different regions. Like if like American players compare themselves to Korean players or like the Chinese style and they try to adopt it, it's never the same. Um, it was kind of similar for me in tennis as well. Like with tennis players, they have their technique, their style, and I just wanted to do what I did best. And I guess that translated to league as well. There's not like there wasn't a big life changing thought process or decision. It's just never something that I've done, and I don't think people should do it. Yeah, I'm not really sure on that one, but
I mean, I never
I
compared
yeah
myself when I first got ranked 2 challenger. I literally was. I had the exact same mindset as him. I was just playing. I never copied any build. I came up with my whole UDA. I mean, the game's changed to a
yeah
point where you probably do need to be doing you should be looking up information. That's what I think the game's at now. But it was purely just playing to just really hard on your mistakes and doing your own thing and zero. I had no one to compare to, and I think that was a huge advantage that I had over other players because I was not comparing myself to anyone else in the scene. And this is why I love Andy's story. And, I sort of like alluded at the beginning is that Andy was never in the social circles to like the social circles when you're climbing and you're becoming like a player. Like you get trapped in like these circles that are almost always, from my experience, negative. Okay. Especially when you're around like, egotistical 16, 17, 18-year-olds, like especially at the time, like the O scene. Obviously, I became a player way before you did, Andy, in 2013. You were in America at that time or whatever.
yeah
But I felt like that was such a huge advantage that you had as well, going from XL5 randomly to supporting Lost into a top 2 team, but you were able to completely deal with it, and it's like you never really cared about. And it didn't even seem like you really cared. I mean, you obviously wanted to beat us a lot because we were talking a lot of shit in dials when you were versing us in Legacy.
yeah for sure.
But yeah, I mean, I remember you came in. I mean, I always obviously the talk of it when you joined Legacy, it was like you're just getting carried by Lost, right? But then you found more and more. It's like holy shit, Cupcake's like pulling his weight. And did you ever feel the pressure playing with someone like Lost when you first joined that Legacy roster? Because you go for playing with some academy, some random amateur player. To straight into Legacy, which was top 2 that split in 2017.
No, I definitely didn't feel any pressure to play with certain players. I just put a lot of pressure on myself to improve because the first few weeks of when I was scrimming, I was inting nonstop, and
Is this
I
with
was
Legacy?
like, yeah. So
Yeah.
like I was just a SoloQ player, and I had a lot of habits that got punished, and I just kept on inting and inting until I figured out what I can and can't do. And then once I found like that balance, then I can pressure the map and I can not int, which is like a pretty decent spot to be in.
So that's what you're
But
always trying to find is that middle ground. It's like not int but pressure map.
play as high pressure as you humanly can is kind of my motto in life and tennis and league. Sounds weird to say in life in this situation, but yeah, be proactive and know your limits perfectly and play on the upper edge of it
Did you figure that out
as closely as
yourself,
you can.
Andy, or was Lost really helpful in your development there? I mean, who else was on that roster? Who was the mid laner for Legacy at that
Tallywhacker,
point in time?
Carbon, Clear, Lost.
Yeah, that's right.
Honestly, I think Lost had really good hands, but he was still really young and he didn't have much macro knowledge at that stage. So I wouldn't necessarily say he helped develop any like important areas. He was like very reliable and he was obviously very talented, which gave me more like comfort and confidence to like worry about my play, which is really important. If I start to get caught up in like my teammates making a lot of mistakes, then that sometimes impacts my own gameplay, which is something I really try to avoid. But obviously, if my teammates are performing really well, then I can really hone in on what I want to do best. So it was really good having such a talented and good ADC for sure. But I don't necessarily see him as like a pivotal point in my career or anything. And maybe again, that's just my personality that I don't see anyone like leading up to where I am or like at my peak that I wouldn't have made it without them. I kind of have that self belief that
You would have figured
I
it out
know what
eventually.
I do, and yeah, yeah. So obviously, like I value like playing with players and sharing experiences with them, but I also have that belief in myself that I got here from myself and not being carried by someone.
So I'm very interested, Andy, to hear your thoughts on solo queue. Because you, again, defy a lot of my and Nathan as well. Our take on how a player gets good and how they're able to reliably perform. And for us, I think solo queue is just so important. But you've never been, even when we were doing very well in 2018, you were never that like grind solo queue, take solo queue like super seriously, like get rank one and that like you never kind of you had your own way of being confident or developing your chair mastery and honing your skills. So walk me through your take on solo queue overall. Even now, I mean, it might have changed from what it was then, but like,
Right.
walk me through.
So yeah, I can start in 2017. I came from solo queue. I was playing a lot of solo queue. 2017, I still played a lot of solo queue, and then we had a Korean boot camp midway through the year, and then I started playing like 10 to 15 hours a day over in Korea. I was absolutely loving it. The level was so high. This is actually how I started to
Wow.
play. In OS solo queue, you can only play champions that you can express skill or gap hard and you don't rely on your teammates. And that's, in my opinion, that's enchanters. Like you can really express a lot of skill and dominate lanes with Nami and Jana, even though it's like, oh, press E. That's definitely not how it works. But yeah, so in Korea, I felt comfortable to pick champs like Braum, like Tam, like Leona Nautilus, and um, really have like a full team performance. And it felt so enlightening, like a huge weight off my chest. Like, holy shit, this is so enjoyable. I'm playing League. This is 5 versus 5, high level. I know my teammates, my AD carry and SoloQ, he's going to pop off, and I'm going to do what I can to help him. And it just doesn't happen in OS at all, even in 2017. So that was so much fun, and I spammed a lot of time, and that's how I got good at him, just spamming him in Korea. And then I came back to OS, and I felt like there was almost no value in playing it. And it's a deep feeling that I can't really like. I know all the arguments for why solo queue is good, but if I don't feel it's valuable, like what can I do about it? So at that stage, solo queue in my mind transitioned from like being important to like two main reasons, like picking up new champs and learning them and stroking your ego. Like if you feel like you're doing shit, if you feel like you're at the bottom of the ladder, just mentally detach yourself from your team and get rank one. Like, oh yeah, now you're the shit again, you know. So, um, I don't think solo queue is good in OS for many things, and the quality has like gotten lower, and that's not something that you want to see. Like as you're trying to progress a career, the queue times are long. You don't. Well, I feel like I haven't really learned anything from solo queue in a long time, and yeah, going from Korea to OS was definitely a big shift that I started to play a lot less. But another thing to keep in mind is when we were full time scrimming on Direwolves, we would play like 6 games a day, and I really fully invested into every single minute. Well, I tried to for as much as I can. I try to stay alert and focused and disciplined every single minute of the game. If someone was starting to tilt, I would get angry and be like, stop wasting my fucking time, you know? And same in review, like we're reviewing, let's review, let's get something out of it. And by the end of the day, I was just so fucking exhausted that I needed to play Fortnite. I needed to chill out, man, you know? And I could log into solo queue so that my teammates feel better about me playing solo queue so I could stroke my ego, but I didn't really see value in it. So I didn't really do it. And I think, yeah, in the whole of 2018, I probably had like 100 solo queue games the whole year, which is like ridiculously low. It's a little bit embarrassing. But the one time I spammed it was when I wanted to pick up Pike. And I think I did that successfully. I had a goal. I didn't care about my teammates or the game result. I really wanted to push limits and figure out how to play this champ as well as I can. And I did that as best as I can. And then that's kind of what I used solo queue for.
Do you think if you're playing another role, Andy, you would be required to play more solo queue? Is it? Do you think this might just be a support thing, or do you think if you were a mid
No.
laner or a top laner, you would be the same? You think that 100 solo queue games?
Um, I think I haven't really met other pro players who don't want or don't need or don't respect solo queue as much as I do. I think it's important for picking up champs, and that could be for any role. But I think another thing is if your performance is lacking, well, when my performance is lacking, I get really angry at myself and I want to improve it. And if if that's through solo queue, if that's through WODs, then that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I just don't like the aimless grinding and without any direction.
Is
Yeah.
it?
I mean,
Is it?
it's strange.
In
It's just
terms
so unique.
of, it is unique, and that's the thing I've always been trying to work out. Cupcake, especially that 2018, just the just compared to other players like a solid. At the end of the day, the scrim schedule is pretty intense, right? Even during the middle and the off season, Andy Cupcake, you didn't really play that much as well. But again, does it just come down to you just think that there just really is no value from solo queue? If there was
It's just
value, what is
confidence,
it?
Nathan. It's just confidence because look,
It's confidence.
Because think about this. Andy, in my experience, is the only player that had confidence.
That didn't come through being higher ranked in solo queue.
It didn't. It didn't come through there because think about this. Most players, you know this, Andy, League or OS, especially OS, players are incredibly insecure about their rank and what other people think about them, right? What other people think about them and what other people how they view their solo queue performance. That's just embedded in the O's culture, right? I mean, especially back then, right? 2017, 2018. But your confidence actually came from within, and it came from your belief and your confidence in your champion's identity. Like, I feel like this all ties back to a few things in my eye. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Andy. One, you had an incredibly clear view of your champion's identities. The champions that you did play. I remember in 2017, you were incredibly good at Braum. You were very good at Zyra, and obviously the Bard. But you thought about them, the champion's identity, and the way they operated in laning phase to such a deep and intuitive level that you didn't have to play Bard v X, Braum versus X, Braum versus Y a bunch of times because you were actually understanding why the things were working or why they didn't work. So, for example, I think a lot of players in League, when they play picking up Braum, they think of it at like super surface level. It's like, okay, Braum versus time. You can do this, you can't do this. It's like very logical. But because you like really embrace the champion, and you can maybe elaborate on this, you really tried to become the champion in the game in a way. I feel as though you just understood the champ to such a deep level that you didn't have to play the same amount of games to get the same effect in terms of behavior in a game. I don't know, maybe I'm reading in too deep to this, but there has to be some thing that you've done during the time that you did play the champion that would make up for the less games. There has to
Right. There probably is an element of that. I've always prided myself on game knowledge and just like knowledge about matchups in general, just not specifically like finger micro, you know? So if I really understood what a champion does and what another champion does, I don't need to play 100 games of that matchup to get it down, I guess. But another big factor is honestly how seriously and how disciplined I was in scrims and how much thought I put into matchups and reviews and everything. that it felt like the time spent there was so valuable and so exhausting that it made up for hundreds and hundreds of SoloQ games of just like autopilot, brain dead, play a bunch of matchups. Um, so it felt like I was at work with the scrims, and I really put my all into it. And then at night, it's like I need to chill out, man. And yeah, I try to really have um, those two areas as clear as possible. And obviously, there was a bit of issue with that with the team, with teammates, like, why aren't you playing solo queue, bro? And then I don't know how to explain, like, I don't want to. I'm fucking tired. I tried really hard. um, so yeah, a little bit of what you said, but a lot was put into how seriously I took the scrims and how sensitive I was to wasting time, which is just something that's been present in my life in general. Like, I hate wasting time, and I want something to come out of everything that I do for the most part. But I will say that if I was a pro player and there was just no competitive structure, there was no scrims, no gaming houses, I would probably be playing a lot more solo queue. But yeah,
Okay. Now, look.
I want to talk about the boar mentality. Where did that come from, Andy? The wild boar mentality.
yeah. So I think it's just it kind of became my identity through the energy that I brought to the team and just who I was as a person, about being really confident, having a strong direction, and it really helped me to compete when I pictured the Rift as like an arena, and they were stuck in the ring with me, and I was going to fight them, and they know it and I know it, and what are you going to do about it? It's something that's helped a lot. Like, whenever it's just like something arbitrary. Let's say you're breaking the ice in like a uni lecture. You know, you stand up, you say your name. What I think is, like, everyone else is so shit scared of what like everyone else thinks of them. Like, if you embrace that, like, you're shit scared, like, I I don't really care anymore, then it's like, okay, I can do anything with confidence. So let's say there's like an important match coming on. There's a lot on the line, I know that, but it's like, there's a lot on the line, and I'm going to deal with it better than you do. So fucking watch out. um, so that's kind of like where it was born, and I felt like adopting like a wild animal mentality in game. Like, I'm just going to relentlessly attack, and I'm going to do it. So it just set this like confidence within me from the start that, like, I just kind of ran with, I guess.
When we had someone write into us in Nathan's mailbag saying they were playing solo queue and then they versed some like matchup or something, and they started losing or something weird happened in the game, and they got so angry they started playing better. And we literally said on the podcast we had a player like that, Cupcake Andy. He was
Yeah.
better as a player when he was angry, when he was versing us, when you wanted to beat us in Dark
Yeah.
Souls and Legacy. That
Yeah.
bad. Tell us, where do you go in your mind there? Why do you play better? Like, would you say, is that an emotional response? Like, where does it come from?
Yeah.
Because you were saying before that you think it's not, you think that being emotional in league's not, you got to control your
Yeah,
emotions,
I don't
right?
know.
So how does this work?
I think there are like really strong principles and morals that I stand by, and one of the first and foremost ones is mutual respect. And if I feel like there's not mutual respect, then I get really fucking pissed off. Um, that happened in tennis as well. If someone's like if someone's like cheating, you can do that in tennis. You can't really do it in league. If someone's cheating, I'm like, I'm gonna fucking beat you, and you better learn respect. That was kind of the approach that I
So
had.
teach them a lesson. It's like teach them a lesson.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I versed you guys in 2017, I'm like, these guys need to learn a fucking lesson. Like, shut up and play the game. And obviously, that was very emotional. I can't 100% put it as to why that emotion is better than like some other emotions for performance. It's more. It just like, I actually don't know. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that either. But
Well, because I think look, I think what it was, man, is that you tapped into something that allowed you to maintain like just a higher average intensity. Because I think the problem with anger, right, most of the time is what I believe is that it's a spike. So it's just like one big spike of anger, and you like it's like and if you let it kind of take over you, and you have this giant spike of energy, it doesn't really get you anywhere, because League is a constant. League, you have to be on for a very long period of time. There is no break. And I think what you managed to do is the way you framed your anger. It wasn't in a sense of, oh, I'm gonna just let it out right now. It's okay, embrace the anger, and let's just raise my entire intensity by the extra notch, and just like leave it here. I'm just gonna idle on 110% intensity. I'm just gonna idle here and sit here, and I'm gonna be on top of you. So I think what it was is that you didn't view it as, I just need a bit of extra energy, a bit of extra anger, which people could let it take full control of them. No, it's like you kind of took control of it. I don't know if like, did you ever watch Naruto?
No, I've never watched anime.
Right. Okay. No point talking about it then. But people in the podcast who watch Naruto, it's kind of like how Naruto is like the main character of this anime, right? Where he like has this giant demon inside of him, but if he lets the demon take full control of him, he loses control, and then he can't manage it. It goes out of control. But if he like kind of builds, he has like a healthy relationship with that anger in a way. He can kind of manage it and control it, and then he actually uses it to, be really, really powerful in a way. I think
it's an interesting concept. Maybe there is something like that. Maybe it's that wild boar that have a intimate relationship with, and I need to negotiate like its boundaries and stuff.
Yeah,
with me.
literally. Yeah, spot on. Look, I think that one thing I would love to dive into here is obviously you're not the same player or person you were in 2018. Times have changed, and now that you've I know now you've been delving into a little bit of coaching, you still currently play as well.
Mm-hmm.
Upon reflection, looking back on your time in 2017, 2018, that's when you were kind of really a full-time pro player. You weren't studying, doing anything else. Were there things you would have changed in your approach, or things that you would have done differently based on what you know now?
I think if I could have gone in with the knowledge of how strong and abrasive my personality can be, and how weak and sheltered a lot of personalities in the esports scene are, that would have helped a lot. I just kind of came in all guns blazing, and you really need to have mutual trust and communication with your teammates to really become better as a team. And I came from an individual sport, no teammates, like you take full responsibility for everything that happens. And I went straight into League of Legends. So there was definitely a bit of an adjustment period as far as that went. But yeah, I think I'm happy with how I approached competing and improving. Just being mindful of like what my personality brings to a dynamic earlier on would have been pretty helpful, I would say.
Right. And say from now playing with players online, so gaming house anymore, how has that altered things for you? How has that been working for you?
It's honestly a little bit frustrating. I feel like I can't reach the level that I reached when I was full-time in a gaming house, and I know my skill and my motivation is still the same. I just can't express it with this remote play, worse scrim times and everything. So it's definitely frustrating. And I still approach competition and the game the same. It's just harder to get on the same page and harder to become a good team, which is the main frustration.
So there's a lot of directions you want to go in here, Nathan. I don't want to steal the show from you. Is there anything immediately that you had? Because I could go on forever here.
Sort of just wrapping up 2018 Direwolves. What do you think made us so good, Andy?
I think First and foremost, there is a baseline level of talent that you need. And I think we met that across the board. So that means that we could work on other aspects which were important. Um, Obviously, you guys had a very successful 2017, but I think I did bring some things into the dynamic that helped. And I think overall, we had a lot of respect for each other as players, and we trusted each other, even if we weren't like really good friends out of the game. And there was like quite a lot of, or quite a few instances of like toxic environments. When it came to game time and scrim time, we didn't waste time, and we trusted and respected each other, and we worked towards a common goal, which was good. And apart from that, we did have talented players and useful personalities to bring about success. Yeah, those would probably be my first thoughts. I'm not sure if you guys have anything, because you were obviously on that team as well.
Look, I think you're right. I think when push came to shove, everyone wanted to win, so we were able to leave the bullshit aside. There was a lot of bullshit. Like you said, there was times where we had an incredibly toxic environment, elitist environment, and all that shit. And when we were there at the studio, when we had to perform, everyone just wanted to win. And look, I think that as well, in many ways, Schönfire and you had this really weird special connection. I kind of feel like you guys. So Schön is the complete opposite to you in so many ways.
Yeah.
Right?
He is.
It's
Yeah.
like opposites attract, right?
Yeah, but I think what I loved about that dynamic between you and Schön is that there was so much mutual respect when it came to just sheer performance. That I think both of your energies, you guys in my eyes were like the two pillars of the team. You know, it was the Schönfire on one side, and then there was the Andy on the other side, and it felt like because you guys, like you said, had that mutual respect, it kind of just bound the team together. It's like, okay, if these two guys, they're so good, and if these guys can actually work together and play well, because again, jungle support, you guys were always kind of as well talking about the game and on the map together and trying to push the pace of the game forward, and you guys were very aligned on that. I think, bro, even though your approach to competing was different and the way you brought about good quality League of Legends was different, when you were in the game, you had the same, you were aligned on what sort of game you wanted to play. Schönfire was that very high pressure, don't want to lose a single objective, take every single fight if it's a good one, in the sense of like always pushing limits in a way, and you really resonated with that. And I think that I think what we managed to do, and I think I did that quite well, as the one thing I did well that year was alignment. I think we actually did have a very strong sense of alignment with the way we wanted to play the game, the way we wanted to draft, and the way you guys saw getting a lead and translating it. And I think when I look nowadays at teams, they just don't have an identity. The players don't have a strong enough identity, and the way they view the game is not clear enough in terms of how they want to win a game. And you can't just have one player like that. You need to have multiple players in a game that have a really, really strong way of viewing the game and have a clear identity. That's how you build the core foundation of the game. Because we knew when it came to draft, Schönfire wanted this, you wanted this, and you were okay to make sacrifices as well. But like, we know what you wanted. And so I'll say that sense of alignment and common goal within the game was super powerful, and that's what differentiated us. It wasn't even the individual play, really.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, it's that personality of like knowing what you want, and once you have players that know what they want, if you can be emotionally mature enough to negotiate that and come out with like a universal strategy or approach to the game, you're gonna go far. But if you just have 5 passive players who are like, I don't really know what I want, I'll help you, like nothing's gonna get done, right? And I think we both strongly knew what we thought was high pressure or favorable game states, and if they didn't happen, we questioned it, and we both were very open to giving and receiving feedback for the most part, I would say. So yeah, in terms of like having a direction, that was very important, and working towards a common goal. We definitely got aligned, and I think you did a great job, like you said, on like getting everyone on the same page. Because I think for the reviews for the specific gameplay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was mostly me and Shin talking about in game states, pressure, all of that stuff. But outside of that, those strong personalities really needed to come together to produce results, and that's what you guys ended up helping with for sure.
Yeah, I think we definitely had a very unique. We had a very unique team because
Yeah, we did
very
for
unique
sure.
team. Do you
Yeah.
actually believe that that was the strongest OS roster? Like we didn't really get to
Um,
show it, right, because of the whole fucking Sharon Fire fiasco at the end of 2018. But do you truly believe that was the strongest OS roster
um,
or not?
I do believe so. I'm wondering if you were to ask the OPL champions of every consecutive year that they would say the exact same thing. So I know in 2019 the Mammoth squad believed that they were the strongest OS roster, but I honestly do believe that we were the strongest, and I try to be aware of like biases or
Right.
like rose tinted glasses and shit. But I think we were pretty good. We were undefeated the whole year, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And like yeah, so and it felt like we were untouchable at least in OS at that stage. So I would say so, but it's not like definitive. It can't be, and maybe other rosters would disagree.
So look, I'm gonna ask a bit of a personal question here, because people probably in the podcast say, if you were so good, how come you didn't get it imported like Destiny,
Yeah.
King, Sharon, all of you? So walk us through your, we won, well, we went to Worlds, we won OS that whole entire year, end of 2018. You had a few decisions to make. Walk us through your series of what happened.
Um, Honestly, it felt like I had nothing to work towards anymore. It was pretty depressing. It felt like I reached the pinnacle in OS that year, and the next best thing would be just to do it all again. And even that would be really hard if players are leaving and shit. So it's like, okay, I felt stagnated. I didn't have something to challenge myself with and to strive for. And this was a year where there were no imports going overseas at all. I think the only player that had gone overseas at that stage was Lost. And I was of the mentality that maybe insanely mechanically gifted ADC and mid players could potentially get picked up. And those weren't my. First of all, the support, you can't really express that nearly as well as ADC and mid, in my opinion. And secondly, that's I've never been the player to just mechanically shut on all of my opponents. So I felt like I believed that I was good enough to go overseas, but I just felt a bit disheartened that I wouldn't be able to showcase my skill set to players. I didn't really have like
You didn't think you
connections
would get the opportunity.
overseas.
You wouldn't get
No,
the
I didn't think I
opportunity
would
to
get the
play.
opportunity. Yeah, I straight up thought that I wasn't going to get picked up, and maybe only insanely talented young ADC and mid players could go overseas. And it's like, okay, what do I do? Like, I just, yeah, bottom line, I felt stagnated, nothing to reach for, and that was kind
Yeah.
of depressing. Yeah.
So then you moved on to your coaching career, Andy, in 2019. You came back, was it 2019 or was it 2020?
Yeah. So initially, the main goal was to finish up my uni degree, and I didn't have any plans to play or coach, but I was approached by an org, and they said, "Yo, do you want to coach?" I'm like, "Oh shit, okay." Maybe this is a cool way to like keep my foot in the esports door, because you never know what could happen down the road. I was still passionate about league and competition. I just didn't know how to progress and express myself anymore, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, then I just was full-time uni and coaching remotely, and that was a way to not only like pay some bills but to stay involved with something that I love, which is league and competition. But it just felt like coaching wasn't the role for me, especially remotely. I felt like I would rather do things myself than coach. I think I don't have enough patience to like full time help someone else do something if I feel like they should just do it better, you know. So that's definitely like a blaring weakness in my personality. I wasn't well suited enough to coaching, but I tried as best as I could to be a good coach. And
What
it's
surprised
another
you? Sorry, go on, Andy. What were you saying?
um, another aspect of coaching that I wasn't attracted to at all was like number crunching and analysis and stuff like that. I didn't want to smash out 400 spreadsheets. I'm more of like I wouldn't say, because like Shern was definitely the most intuitive, but there's definitely an element of that for me as well. And I like, I don't know, it's hard to express my personality and skill set as a coach. I feel like you need to just crunch some numbers and just do some shit that I didn't really enjoy at all. So there was an element of that as well, and being remote. Um, yeah, if you're not working full time in the same house, having important discussions, face to face convos, and really working towards a common goal, it's like, all right, this is just a part time job, and that's not. If I would do something, I want to go 100% at it. So I was always looking for um, my re-entry into OPL, especially when all of the players started getting picked up onto international teams. So then I was like, shit, man, what are you doing? Like, if you just stayed full time, you could have been overseas by now. And then I've been in this like awkward dilemma of like finished a degree, all in to league as soon as humanly possible. And it's like, fuck, now it's just I need to finish my degree and it's my last semester, and then I'll try to make up for lost time. So that's where I am at the moment, and it's not been a smooth journey since 2018.
Going back to your coaching career quickly, Andy. Obviously, Curtis and I coaches ourselves. Is there anything you really surprised you when you started coaching like these players and you were outside of the whole team, like you weren't actually on the rift, like making the shot calls and stuff like that? Is there anything that surprised you about coaching?
I would say some of my weaknesses really started to shine through. I was a player that I felt knew what was high pressuring or favorable game states, but I couldn't explain it. I just could not go, point by point exactly why this is better than another. I just knew it. I felt it. And trying to explain that to other players who are, um, they have their own views of the game, right? And maybe they've just come off a loss and they're a bit like more hostile, or like they don't really want to listen to it. Like, all I'm saying is you should do this, and they're like, why? And then I'm like, fuck, man, I don't know, just do it. And then they're like, no. So it's like, I don't know, man. It's like
Yeah.
major communication or like game knowledge. I don't know. It was just really frustrating, but it did help a lot that the players respected me as a person or a player, or they respected my game knowledge or whatever, so that I could say some things and they would just like trust me with it. But yeah, that was always a big frustration. And then I get really angry at myself for not being able to explain why they should do something. Yeah.
So when you actually specifically watched other support players, what did you see differently when you were comparatively to when you were playing? Even now when you play, what are the
Yeah.
differences?
I would I would get like I would have quite a few emotional reactions. I would be really angry. Or I wouldn't like express it to them just when I'm watching the games. I'd be really angry that they're not pressuring the map as much as they should have. Like they're just AFKing. They're not like looking for windows to roam. They're just it just looks like they're a passenger, and that's not the way to bring about results. So I tried to um, you know help put some of my strengths into their gameplay. Obviously, I'm not a perfect player, but I know some things that they could have done better, and I tried to help them with that. But Yeah, there was a stage there that I reached that I felt like they had limitations. There's only so much that me constantly saying you can do this, you can do this, you can do this better. Like it's not the specifics that they need to understand. It's the driving force behind it that they need to adopt so that they can apply that approach or like skill set to all situations. If that makes sense. Like doesn't matter
It's like a
if I
mentality.
say
It's like mentality
yeah, it's a
behind the play.
mentality. And it's so hard to teach a mentality. And there's so many unique situations in League that it's pointless me just going one by one, do this, do this. It's like, no, approach the game differently. Change who you are. And it's like, fuck, man, what? I can't. Like, how do I bring about
You
results? How do I?
usually explained, Andy, you loved cricket and the whole small wins and like small
Yeah,
mindset.
yeah,
Like, is
yeah,
that not a
yeah.
mentality mindset that you could get across? Like that's an analogy you could use.
Small victories. Yeah,
Small victories.
yeah. That is something that I could have gotten across. I think, especially if I was in the gaming house full time, constantly having discussions with people. But it felt like either the window for change was too short in a League
A
of
split.
Legends year that it felt like people understood what I was saying and they were on board, but okay,
Needed
they're not
time.
doing it and it's not them yet. So that was another frustration. I wasn't like frustrated at them. I was frustrated at my inability to produce change and the like constraints on being a coach. So pretty much I felt like being a coach was useless and being a player was 1,000 times more impact.
So how would you recommend? So let's just say a player would have come to you nowadays. Say an aspiring pro player, 15-year-old kid. Maybe was a big fan of you, watched a lot of your gameplay, whatever it was. And he asked, maybe he asked a question specifically about how would I find my own identity as a player? How would I go about? Because I get this question all the time. I don't know about you, Nathan. I get questions like, I just don't know. First of all, I don't know what champs I like. I don't know the way I like to play the game. I feel like I'm just following everyone else, that sort of thing. How would you develop that sort of? What advice would you give to that? Because I feel like that is the crux of developing self confidence. Because I feel like if you can't trudge that own path by yourself or begin it by yourself, you're just going to go around in circles. What would you say to a young kid, aspiring pro player?
To find their own identity.
Find their own identity, yeah. So because you did it in your own way, but how would you? Because that's a question I get interested to hear your response.
Yeah, that's something that I would be able to answer by actions, and I would really suck at explaining. So that's probably why I shouldn't be a coach. But
Right.
um, I would say how to find your own identity. I think it just comes from like a deep understanding of like first of all who you are, like what your personality is, what you're drawn to. It comes a lot of out of game, in my opinion. You really need to understand your strengths and weaknesses as a person first, and then it's really broad. But like if you apply your personality into the game and you really know who you are, then when you're in game and you're playing who you are, certain champs will become more and less appealing, certain playstyles, certain items, even. And just having a clear, it just sounds like I'm saying have a clear identity to have a clear
Yeah,
identity,
no, I know
but
what you mean. Yeah.
um,
Just have a clear
knowing,
identity.
Well, you kind of
like,
got. It seems like the way what you're trying to say is you listen to your emotions or listen to the way you feel, and then you kind of just test a lot of the things to see what feels best for you. So it's kind of
yeah,
like try all these champs, which one clicks, and then kind of go. It's just you're saying it's very intuitive, very feel oriented.
yeah, you should have a feeling of how you think the game should be approached, how you approach the game, how you approach situations in the game, and what champions, what items, what game states produce that feeling, and then you can kind of go from there. So if
I
you're
love how you
very
talk about items. It's like an item. You can
yeah,
have a
you can
chair. You can have,
items items have personality, man. They straight up do.
so what's your item of choice? If you were to pick one item in the store that encapsulates Cupcake, what's that item?
Uh, uh no, 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 no. It's not like one item fits all. I would
Yeah.
say I would say Dead Man's on like Bard though.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. But
That's a personality. The roaming around being unkillable.
well, it's like, are you the type of player to build redemption first every single game state? Are you the type of player who likes roaming? So you go Dead Man's. Are you the type of player who likes, setting up or damage or something? So it's
Yeah.
just like your personality just, encroaches onto all aspects of your life and gaming as well. And if you recognize it, then that'll help a lot, in my opinion. It's probably a bit strange advice, but yeah, just understanding who you are and what you want to do in the game will help a lot. And if you're not constantly following other people just for the sake of following them, it's very good to get information from outside sources. You don't want to just be a closed system and like, I know everything, I'm the best. It's like you are open to information, but you integrate it into your own personality and in your own understanding. You don't have like a emotional reaction to watching a pro player like, oh shit, he's so good. I want to be him. I want to do everything like him. It's
Or
like, oh,
copy
he did
everything
this.
he has.
Yeah. It's like, oh, he did this well. I can do that well. Oh, this other player did this well. I could do that. And then, oh, I do this well. I'll keep doing that. And then you just keep on building onto your own identity. It's not like an overnight thing. You're like, oh, I'm a bad one trick, It's like
Yeah.
constant struggling process, I would say.
Andy, how are
Now,
there so many OS players in the LCS? What's your take on that? Is this a wave that is only going to be one wave, and then we're not going to really have any more imported? Because Curtis and I have had this discussion on the podcast before, where we think that there's been a certain era, again your era, around like that 2017, 2018, when all the whole gaming houses and stuff happened, is that's when the O scene had the most investment, and where we actually did all those Korean boot camps, and we went internationally. I mean, I guess you can't say it's like, yeah, we felt like we went internationally more with like riff rivals and stuff. Those set of players have had more development that allows them to be better than academy players or the NA residents, and then that wave, that infrastructure for OS is not there anymore. Is it like a wave thing? Is it? I mean, I guess there's sort of two questions there. Was it just one wave that has gone over and will go over there? And the other second question is I mean, why is there so many OS players with starting LCS spots over NA players when our SoloQ is so bad? How does that make sense?
Yeah. This is quite a complex issue, I'd say. There is a lot of talent in OS, or there has been, and it's good that they get opportunities, and I know that they will perform in NA. I also think there's a lot of talent in other small regions just by default. I don't know, I don't watch intimately Turkish or Brazil or Russian or whatever scenes, but I think it helps that we're a fully English speaking region, and knowing people and having connections in the States like helps you to get the opportunities that you can actually perform with. So yeah, I would say the level of SoloQ is not high, but there are players and personalities that if you were to put them in a different environment, they would thrive in a more competitive environment. So it's like you can be shit in O's, but once you leave to a different region with a higher skill cap, you'll be good there. And I think that's like a talent and a personality thing. So yeah, in terms of the waves thing, I don't necessarily think it was just 2017, 2018, and now OS is gone, although it does hurt that the competitive infrastructure has taken a massive hit, not being full time scrimming and gaming houses and everything. So that sucks. But there still will be upcoming talent, and there still will be players that will perform overseas in NA. But it's a massive help that OS was given such a good opportunity being counted as NA residents. Not really sure why we have that over other minor regions, but that means that we don't take up an import slot anymore, right? So that's really handy as well. And it's just in terms of like performing overseas and in the LCS, I'm not 100% sure, but like moving overseas and it's just like fully changing your whole life, and like your direction is now like completely shifted. It's like you have this new level of motivation to other players potentially from that region that just do this or have done this for a long time. But I'm still not 100% sure on that one. Well, yeah.
So you think that OS players, and this is what I've thought as well, is that we've always had nothing. OS is that we have like this wanting it more than maybe NA players do, because like, you know, they're just sitting there relaxing. You know, there's obviously lots of talented players in NA as well, but I mean, I guess that this is, again, I think Curtis and I have this mentality as well. It's like we're always, whenever we went to MSI, went to Worlds, we're like the little guys, right? We've always got something to prove, you feel like. But you feel that all the time. And I feel like that what all these those players that have gone over there, it's like they feel like they've got a chip on their shoulder, and they're just going to want it more.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You do feel like you're constantly... You constantly have to prove yourself. It's not like North America is all like bad and lazy. It's like minor regions really have no respect, and you want respect, and that already puts you at like a bit of a advantage. If you have your back against the wall, it's like the only way you can go is forwards. You got to fight your way up, right? So I guess there's an element of that.
I want to spice things up here, because I know, Andy, this is where you have some pretty strong opinions. Okay.
Oh no.
Competitors in League of Legends at the moment. So one of the biggest reasons I stepped away from esports, because I can't stand coaching the current generation of pro players anymore. I can't do it. It's one. I'm not saying it's the only reason. It's one of the reasons. I would if everyone were maybe had a competitive background like you, Cupcake, and you know. A little bit further along in their development as an actual competitor, and they had that ability to I would say ability to kind of improve that. No, that's not the right way to put it. I would say it's self-awareness, a level of self-awareness. The coaching experience would be a lot more enjoyable to me and a lot more fulfilling. But right now it feels like I'm just a babysitter. And coaching to a certain extent is like, okay, you've got 5 somewhat children and they are not incentivized to not act like children because everyone else acts like children.
Yeah.
So it's just going to stay like that. And even when you look at some of the top players in other regions, that's just the way it is. At the moment, in the current state of things right now, I know Thorin, Nathan was referring to it earlier on. Thorin did a piece on Nemesis and why Nemesis, correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, he said like Nemesis would never be a champion. Something like that, right, Nathan?
Yep.
Right, and that tweet that Nemesis made, right? This is the sort of stuff we deal with. Nemesis is viewed as one of the best players in the West, right? As an individual mid laner, individual player, and he had a tweet that said, "I don't want to join a team surrounded that isn't already good." It was something like that, right, Nathan? It was like, "I don't want to join a team that isn't already the best," or something like that. And that mentality of like, I only should play with good players, and I'm not going to do anything to bring about or step up, take control of the situation, help other people improve, be a leader, create a culture, develop over the long run, like you would see in a lot of other sports. You don't just see a player who's never won a single championship. Nemesis hasn't won a single championship, right? He hasn't done anything, achieved anything, and he's just gone...
He went to Worlds. He went to Worlds.
Okay, he went to Worlds, right? But like...
They did alright. Fnatic did alright.
Did they win that year? They
No, they went
came
into the
second.
quarterfinals.
No,
Quarterfinals.
but in their region,
Yes, yeah.
They came second, I'm pretty sure.
they came
right?
second.
Yeah, it was G2 Fnatic, then Mad Lions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, still, he hasn't really achieved much. And then you got like, then you look at the Last Dance. You look at Michael Jordan, one of the best rookie talents ever, and then he like builds with what they don't win for ages. They didn't win a single
8
thing
years.
for ages.
Yeah.
It was 8 years, right?
Yeah, something like 8-9 years, yeah.
And he builds, and then you build, and
He
you
was the
build,
best player on
and
the
you
team
build.
for eight years, and then the pieces just slowly chipped away and came around him to get to
what
a
I'm-
championship winning roster.
So what I'm saying here is that the current state of the ecosystem in terms of pro players is disgusting. I'm gonna go out there and it's just disgusting. I look at the way pro players act. Like, and look, at the end of the day, they're young kids, but like, it's the fact that orgs don't give a shit. There's no standard set by the org. You got players from Innos. We have teams like Peace and all these players that are quote unquote pro players. They act like 2-year-olds and they're representing an
Yeah.
organization. They're not incentivized. They're not punished. Nothing. There's no threat of the bench like there would be in other sports. Like you going over and playing tennis, you have a standard. You have a standard to hold to. How do you wrestle with this? Because you're a little bit different. You're like we said, you're on the outside. You're not in that niche circle, the clique
Definitely
social
not.
circle.
Yeah.
And has this something that's really crossed your mind during wanting to continue playing it in the pro level?
It hasn't impacted like if I should continue playing. I'm going to continue playing. That's what I do. But I'm with you in that I think they're just like general behavior is deplorable, and they're supposed to be role models and they're not. And it makes me really depressed sometimes when I think about it. And that's why I don't have my full life, like social life, spared time, everything invested into League. It's like I do that and I do it as best as I can, but I have my friends or I have like other hobbies or something that I can just escape for a little bit. And if I was trapped in that world the whole time, I would go insane. So it does affect me, and I really wish that I could share mutual respect with my fellow colleagues, but I can't, and it's pretty sad. And I don't think it's necessarily just this year or like the last year, although it is getting worse. I think just the general standard is just completely non-existent. And that Nemesis situation that you brought up, personalities like that would get weeded out instantly in more competitive structures.
Traditional sports.
They would just be 200th in the world, whereas people who just adopt and embrace challenge and responsibility continuously, they'll just shine above. So you wouldn't even have to read shit like that. So there is a lack of challenge.
But how can this happen though?
Yeah.
But this is what we're confused. This is what I really dislike as well about League specifically in the pro scene is like you said, in other traditional sports, you get weeded out so fast. Like if you want to play basketball, you have to play from an incredibly young age. They're ultra competitive from 10 years old, 10 years old, ultra competitive. Coaching staff's amazing. To even get remotely close to even college basketball, you're already surrounded by elite performers, elite coaching staff. You're held to an insane standard, an insane schedule.
Yeah.
You just, that personality just is so far gone. They're done by the time they're 12. So
if you're lazy
League's not
or
like that whatsoever.
delusional, yeah, if you're lazy or delusional, like you'll just get weeded out. Like when you told me that Nemesis tweet, that just reeked of laziness. Like, put me on the best team, and then I'll be on the best team. Like I don't have to work for it. I don't have to prove anything. I don't like. It's just so lazy, and then you'll have a lot of players that like are delusional, and in other structures, like that delusion will get outshone by people who are like harder working or like have more self-awareness or something, and it just doesn't really happen in esports. And honestly, it's a bit sad. I thought like there are a lot of players that play, and I thought that maybe those approaches to league and improvement would get weeded out by people who are more competitive or emotionally mature and intelligent. But maybe it's just something that gamers in general, they don't have
Well,
as
again,
much of
it's
in
it's the
terms of
pathway. It's the pathway. That's why it's different with you, Andy. Is that you came from a very disciplined, structured world. The whole tennis scholarship. You had to perform, otherwise you're getting kicked out. Okay. In League of Legends, you don't have that because if you are the best players, right now at an organization and you're 17, 18 year old, they'll pick you up. I mean, they have to because there's just no one better, really. And there's no
Right.
develop. The SoloQ comes in. SoloQ is the development. Organizations don't develop players. It's SoloQ and like, I mean, I guess sort of scrims in a way. It's a time thing, Curtis. We've talked about this before. We understand why it happens because right now, 25-year-old players, they're not as good as 18, 19-year-old players. And that is a fact.
Yeah.
So players either are getting burnt out, okay, there is like that invisible narrative where it's like you become less of a mechanical player. And players just get weeded out of the scene. I mean, even players like, people like Boxer and stuff, like his career is sort of on the down now. Would you agree? But he's one of the more older, like people like him, I would say, put that into the situation. Like Jono's spoken very highly of Boxer, right? But at the end of the day, he's probably not going to be on a top winning team ever again. Okay. So the only players that are like left that I sort of see is, I think Core JJ is a great example. I just looked up his age. He's 27 years old. He's ranked 2 on the SoloQ ladder. He's been on the top team for a very long time. I think he's married. I think he's married. Like he's got his life all sorted in North America. But how many Core JJs do you have in the league, in all regions in the world, right? Very few. So it's not until the players that are the best I'd say have had that time to grow and develop and understand the whole team aspect. The best players must be between the ages of 27 plus. Until that's the only way we'll get to where Curtis is utopia of League of Legends, where he can actually coach those players.
Well, that's
and,
what
then
I'd love
obviously,
to coach.
and then obviously you've got the 19 and 20-year-old players that are inserted in between it. But right now it's like, all right, let's get the next 18, 19, 20-year-old. Let's get the next one. Let's get the next one. And it's just and the 25-year-olds, they're all gone. So it's not possible right now, given that there is the general thing that league careers are very short right now.
Yeah, I will say it's important to note that like in every sport or like any competitive endeavor, there will be people that don't have a good approach, and not every tennis player has like my approach to competition. Some players obviously have it better than I do, and it's just about who's at the top and the role models. And if the professionals and the people who have big impressions on Twitter, they're the ones that should be at the bottom, then that's the problem. Like with the way that they approach things, because then like aspiring players start like adopting their behaviors, and it's just like it's not conducive to like high performance in general. It just kind of it stagnates the whole competitive scene, which is an issue. So I don't think everyone should suddenly be like super experienced or competitive or amazing. That's just never going to happen. It's not possible. But the role models really need to step up, in my opinion.
And then you have people like Bjergsen gone.
Yeah, Bjergsen retiring is actually it actually pisses me off. It actually really pisses me off. He had such a great opportunity to set the precedent of like what the future league player could look like. Because speaking from experience, Andy, I don't know if I told you this, but I am now at least 2 times better mechanically than I have ever been in my league career. When I was 17, 18 and playing pro. And what's interesting is I broke this narrative, right? The narrative I had in my mind, and a lot of older players, is like you get worse with time. You're older, the old gamer hands, like you're just kind of screwed. And I set a challenge for myself. I'm like, I'm going to break down how to get better at the game micro-wise. Because what happened, I started getting gapped really hard mechanically by people in mid lane. I couldn't compete. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have a huge focus on my micro specifically. And I got way better. I developed a toolkit to get better mechanically. And I'm way better than I've ever been. And I'm mechanically on the same level, if not better, than the majority of OPL players. And then I'm upset that players like Bjergsen, for example, haven't set the scene to say, hey everyone, No, instead of getting worse with age, you can actually get better because now you have the emotional intelligence, you have the identity of a player down pat, you have a much more holistic view of the game, understand the leadership and like the teamwork aspect of things. You now also probably have a toolkit to be able to develop certain aspects of your play. You can actually really change and be a true role model for a long period of time to come. Like Core JJ, like you said, Core JJ is one of them. But he's at the end of the day, he's not an American as well. Like that, I think actually to a certain extent that does play a part in things because like he's Korean.
Well, Bjergsen isn't either, right?
Right, got you. But like I would say a Westerner as a better way of putting it.
It's definitely closer, yeah.
And yeah, I think you're spot on, Andy. But it's the lack of role models. The role models really hurt, and the role models in our region. You know, the quote unquote role models are what you got like two.
It's come to the stage where I honestly just don't use Twitter anymore. It just makes me angry and depressed.
I got rid of Twitter 6 months ago, Andy. I'm on board on that one.
It's pretty much it's something that I don't want in my life, and it's awkward because it's like pretty intimately linked with my career in professional gaming. So it's kind of stressful some ways, but no, I definitely agree with the lack of role models thing.
Do you think that one other thing we didn't touch on here is tilt and getting upset in game? When you were playing a lot of SoloQ, obviously, I watched you play. You would get very angry. But like you expressed anger, like I could see it. You would actually talk to yourself, like you'd say, "Oh fuck, come on, man, get your shit together." Like you literally say that while you're playing, but you never typed. I mean, I might be wrong, but from what I have seen you in SoloQ and I never saw you type. You never talk shit. You were always to yourself. What do you think is the difference between why someone like you, who held yourself to such a high standard, wanted results, was very? I would say at the end of the day, I wouldn't say you're fully results oriented. I would say you're definitely more process oriented, but you definitely cared about the results. How were you able to wrestle with that? How were you able to, and what do you think differentiates you from someone who also cares a lot about the results? So Schoenfire was very toxic, for example, but because he had that intensity, same sort of intensity. How did you wrestle with that, and why did it never cross your mind?
Well, I think it's just I place it in a box that things are inside of my control and things are outside of my control. And if I have bad teammates or if they're typing a lot or like I want them to do something, it's not in my control. And I honestly believe if I pinged and typed a lot more constructively in SoloQ, I would win more games, but I just don't really care. I want to be good at the game, and it's fun playing at a high level, and I don't want to constantly be like giving lessons to people, and it's just kind of tiring and pointless for me. So I definitely get frustrated, but it helps to be a bit more process orientated in that I'm playing to improve. And if I played 100 SoloQ games in average, all of my bad SoloQ teammates will be on the enemy team the same number of times. So it's like, they're shit, we're shit, who cares? Just focus on what you can control. So that kind of helps, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think look, at the end of the day, what I've gathered a lot from this, man, and I think unfortunately, a lot of this is tied back to your experiences growing up. Nathan, what do you think here? Because I think a lot of the things, unfortunately,
Curtis, we always say League is a confidence-based game. I think Cupcake Andy embodies.
He embodies
embodies that.
No, but his confidence doesn't come from something that he learned during League. His confidence was already set in stone.
The belief, again, Andy said it many times, the skill set. He believes he has a skill set to compete with the best players.
I will say it definitely helped, but if you guys know Arctic, he actually grew up playing tennis with me, and he played a lot of tennis tournaments as well.
Of
And
course, yeah.
we're like very different personalities, so it did help. But I I do believe that it's who I am and the process of like reflecting and being who I want to be. I wouldn't say I am who I am and I've achieved what I have just because I've played tennis. There's a lot more to that, but it definitely has played a part.
Got you.
Mm.
So Nathan, was there anything else you wanted to cover here?
I think
maybe
we've
everything.
I've covered everything. I was just mostly
Brilliant.
excited to get into the ball mentality, so I think Andy covered that really well. So
Brilliant.
I want our BBC listeners to have that ball mentality going into SoloQ. That's how we're gonna take control. This is my river. This is my bush. This is my jungle. This is my lane. You're on the rift
Yeah.
with me. You're in my arena. I love that.
It's the only way to approach just anything. If you want results, you have to,
Attack
take
it
full
aggressively.
control. Yeah, you have to be really proactive, and you have to make sure that it happens. And this can be, it sounds stupid, but it can be for anything in life. Let's say you are looking for a flat with your friends, and like one personality type will be like, oh, we'll see what happens. Maybe one will pop up. Oh, have you checked one out? Nah. And then another personality type will like go actively to specific flats and be like, this is what I want. Do you want this? What do you guys want? And then they'll be constantly searching for it and making sure that they take like full control of the outcome. And if you take full control of the outcome, then that's the best long term predictor of success. If you are the X factor, if you make things happen, you don't have to rely on other things, and you're the constant in every equation. So yeah.
Excellent. I think that's a great way to wrap up.
So,
there. That's how we're
I
gonna,
think one last thing to wrap
go
it
on,
up.
Curtis. Yeah.
Are there any people that you want to shout out in terms of who inspired you along the way, or books you've read, people that you've looked up to, to shaped your view on life and philosophy?
Honestly, I would say I really valued a lot of our convos, Curtis, and I still have flashbacks of when you were trying to give me feedback and I was just a stubborn asshole. And then afterwards, you were like, I just had to tank it. I just had to put up with it because I knew that you weren't going to budge. I always reflect on that, like, shit, man. I was like, I always try to avoid like giving that off now. And there were a lot more situations that I think just your like emotional maturity and just like being a decent person really helped shape me for sure. Um, and I would say with King, we have a lot of history. We went back to like 2016 SoloQ. That's how I even got into the competitive scene, is because he noticed me and he respected me and I respected him. And yeah,
So for those that know, King's the current 80k for Cloud9 Academy.
yeah. And I think if it wasn't for him, I would have had to potentially just work my way up. And I believe that's what I deserve to do. I deserved to start at the bottom and prove myself. But because of him noticing me, I just got to start at the top, which was just really cool for me and lucky. And yeah, it's been awesome to play with him and talk with him. He helped me develop certain skills for myself, and I helped develop skills for him. And yeah, he would definitely be a good shout out for me as well.
I really appreciate that, Andy, man. And I mean, it goes both ways. I think you had a huge influence as my view of the game. I think when I think back on players who really shaped my philosophy on the game and just improvement and what it takes to be the best, was just you, and I would say you and I mean all of those players, like in certain ways, even Chippy's in certain ways, King in certain ways, all these players in certain ways, but definitely you and Shern were up there. And if we can have more players like you in the pro scene, then who knows? Then maybe one day make a guest appearance.
Yeah, looking
Who
forward to
knows?
it, man.
Great.
Nathan,
Well,
we'll wrap it
thanks
up.
everyone for listening. Episode 49 of the Broken by Concept podcast. Again, thanks Cupcake Andy for coming on, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.